One evening, a man in his late 30s walked into the courtroom with visible frustration written across his face. His movements were sharp, impatient, like someone who had already been dealing with the situation for too long. He took his place at the plaintiff's table and immediately began organizing a stack of papers, though it looked more like he was trying to release tension than prepare. Across from him sat a younger woman, calm, almost detached. She leaned back slightly in her chair, hands folded neatly, watching him without reacting. The judge entered, took her seat, and glanced over the file. The claim was direct. The man alleged that the woman had robbed him, taken a sum of $8,000 in cash from his apartment. He insisted it had happened during a visit when she had come over under the pretense of returning personal belongings. When asked to speak, he didn't hesitate. "She took it," he said. "I had the money in a drawer. After she left, it was gone." His tone was firm, certain. The judge nodded once, then looked at the defendant. "Your response?" The woman didn't move immediately. "I didn't take anything," she said. Her voice was calm, flat, no urgency. The judge leaned back slightly. "So we have a direct accusation and a direct denial," she said. "That's where we start." She turned back to the man. "Do you have any proof the money existed?" He nodded quickly. "Yes, bank withdrawal." He handed over a receipt. The judge examined it. $8,000, withdrawn 2 days before the alleged incident. She looked up. "And you kept it in your apartment?" "Yes." "In cash?" "Yes." The judge placed the receipt down. "That establishes you had the money," she said. "Not that it was taken." The man nodded, as if expecting that. "I have more," he added. The judge gestured. "Go ahead." He reached into his folder and pulled out printed screenshots, messages between him and the woman. "You said you were coming over," he pointed out. "You were there that night." The woman didn't deny it. "I visited," she said. "Yes," the judge noted that. "So you were present in the apartment?" "Yes." The judge turned to her. "And you're saying you did not take the money?" "That's correct." The judge tapped her pen lightly. "Anyone else in the apartment?" The man shook his head. "No." The judge nodded slowly. "So this comes down to credibility." The room grew quieter, because without direct proof, that's exactly where it would land. The man leaned forward slightly. "She's the only one who could have taken it," he said. The woman remained still. "That doesn't make it true," she replied. The judge watched both of them carefully. Then she asked a question that shifted the direction slightly. "Do you have any surveillance? Cameras? Anything that shows what happened?" The man paused, then nodded. "Yes." The woman's eyes moved slightly for the first time. "From where?" the judge asked. "My apartment," he said. The judge raised an eyebrow. "You have cameras inside your apartment?" "Yes." "Where exactly?" "Living room, entryway." The judge gestured toward the clerk. "Let's see it." The room adjusted again, attention narrowing, focus sharpening. Because now there was something more than statements. The video loaded slowly, the screen flickered, then the footage appeared, a timestamp in the corner, a view of the living room, the front door visible to the side. The man and the woman entered the frame together. They looked normal, no tension, no argument. They sat down, talked. At one point, she stood up and walked briefly toward the hallway, out of camera view. The man pointed at the screen. "That's when she took it," he said. The judge didn't respond. She kept watching. The woman returned to the frame, moments later, sat down again, and continued talking as if nothing had happened. Nothing in the footage appeared suspicious at first glance. The judge leaned slightly forward. "Is there footage from the hallway?" she asked. The man hesitated. "No." "So we don't see the drawer," the judge said. "No." The video continued. After a few minutes, the woman stood up, gathered her things, and left. The man remained behind. The footage didn't show anything obvious. The judge looked back at him. "This shows she was present," she said. "It does not show theft." The man frowned slightly. There's more, he said. The judge gestured. Play it. The clerk opened another clip. This one was from later that same night. The man was alone in the apartment. He walked into frame, moving quickly, heading toward the same hallway the woman had disappeared into earlier. The judge watched closely. He returned seconds later, holding something. Cash. He counted it quickly, then paused. His movements slowed. Then, unexpectedly, he took part of the stack and placed it into a different drawer, one not visible in the earlier footage. The courtroom shifted, subtly, but unmistakably. The judge didn't interrupt. She let the video play. The man looked around briefly, then closed the drawer and stepped out of frame. The clip ended. Silence, the kind that doesn't need explanation. The judge turned her head slowly toward the plaintiff. Would you like to explain that? She asked. The man didn't answer immediately, because in that moment, the entire case, his claim, his certainty, his accusation, had just been rewritten by his own evidence. The man stared at the screen for a second longer than anyone else, as if waiting for it to change, as if hoping there was another version of that footage, one that matched what he had been saying since he walked in. But there wasn't. The judge didn't move. She let the silence stretch just enough to remove any chance of quick explanation. Go ahead, she said calmly. Explain it. The man swallowed, his earlier confidence gone completely now. I was checking the money, he said. The judge tilted her head slightly. Checking it, she repeated. And moving it? He hesitated. I didn't want to leave it all in one place. The judge didn't respond right away. Instead, she leaned back, her eyes still fixed on him. So after she left, she said slowly, you went to the drawer where you claim the money was stored, took it out, counted it, and then moved part of it to another location. Yes, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. The judge nodded once. And when did you discover the money was missing? The question came clean, precise. The man paused. Later that night, he said. The judge didn't blink. After this video, another pause. Yes? The judge folded her hands on the desk. So, according to your own timeline, she said, the money was in your possession after the defendant left. The room was completely still now. The woman didn't speak. She didn't need to. The judge continued. You counted it, she said. You handled it. You moved it. Each point landed clearly. And yet you came into this court claiming it was stolen during her visit. The man's breathing had changed, slower, heavier. I thought, he started, but the sentence didn't finish, because whatever he thought didn't align with what was now undeniable. The judge leaned forward slightly. You thought what? She asked. He looked down at his hands. I couldn't find it the next day, he said. The judge didn't react. So instead of retracing your own actions, she continued, you assumed she took it. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. The judge turned briefly toward the screen, then back to him. You brought this video to support your claim, she said, but it does the opposite. The statement was simple, final. The man closed his eyes briefly. I didn't realize, he said quietly. The judge cut in, not harshly, but firmly. That's the problem, she said. You didn't verify, you accused. The words carried weight, because now the case wasn't about missing money anymore. It was about a false accusation, one backed by evidence that directly contradicted it. The judge turned to the defendant. You were in his apartment, she said, but there is no evidence that you took anything. The woman nodded slightly. I told you, she said, her voice calm but firmer now. The judge gave a small nod, acknowledging that. Then she turned back to the plaintiff. Do you have any evidence, any at all, that the defendant took your money? He didn't respond, because there wasn't any, only assumption. The judge leaned back again. This case is very clear, she said. The man looked up, but there was no argument left in him. You had possession of the money after the defendant left, she continued. Your own video confirms that. A pause. Your claim of theft is not supported by evidence. The decision had already formed. I am ruling in favor of the defendant. The words landed without resistance. The woman exhaled slowly, not dramatically, but enough to show the shift, the release of being accused of something she didn't do. The man remained still. This case is dismissed, the judge added. The gavel came down, short, final. The man didn't move right away. He stood there, looking at the screen that had just undone his entire case. Because the truth hadn't come from argument. It hadn't come from pressure. It came from something he brought himself. Evidence that told a story he didn't expect to hear. The courtroom began to move again, but the man didn't. He stayed where he was, eyes still fixed on the screen even after it had gone dark. The footage had ended, but its impact hadn't. It lingered, clear, undeniable, impossible to reframe. A court officer stepped closer. "Sir," he said quietly, "you'll need to step out." The man nodded, almost absent-mindedly, and gathered his papers. But this time, there was no urgency in his movements, no frustration, just a slow, deliberate process, like someone replaying everything in his head while going through the motions. Across the room, the woman stood up as well. She didn't rush, she didn't react, but there was a subtle shift in her posture now, more grounded, less defensive. As they both reached the hallway, the space felt different, less formal, more real. The man stopped near the wall, running a hand over his face. "I really thought it was gone," he said, not looking at her. The woman paused a few steps away. "That doesn't make it mine," she replied. Her voice wasn't harsh, but it wasn't soft either. It was clear. The man nodded slowly. "I know." A brief silence followed. People walked past them, but neither moved. "I couldn't find it," he said again. "I checked everywhere." The woman folded her arms lightly. "And you didn't think to check the place you moved it to?" she asked. The question was simple, but it cut through everything. The man exhaled. "I forgot," he admitted. That word settled heavily, not dramatic, just honest. The woman watched him for a moment. "That's a big thing to forget," she said. He didn't argue. "I panicked," he replied, "and you were the last person there." She nodded slightly. "That's how accusations start," she said. "Not with proof, with panic." He looked down. "I shouldn't have taken it this far." "No," she said, "you shouldn't have." There was no anger in her tone now, just finality. The kind that comes after being forced to defend yourself against something that never should have been claimed in the first place. The man reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. "I'll check again," he said, almost to himself. The woman didn't respond, because at this point it didn't matter where the money was. The case had already been decided. What remained wasn't legal. It was personal. After a few seconds, she turned and walked down the hallway, her steps steady, her pace controlled. No need to look back. The man stayed where he was a moment longer, then finally pushed himself off the wall and headed toward the exit. Outside, the air felt quieter than expected. He stopped just beyond the courthouse doors, pulling out his phone again, scrolling, thinking. Then slowly, realization seemed to settle further. Not just about the money, but about the chain of decisions that followed. Inside the courtroom, the judge had already moved on. Another case, another claim, another version of events waiting to be tested. But what happened in that room lingered in a different way, because this wasn't a case that turned on complex law or hidden evidence. It turned on something much simpler, a moment of assumption backed by certainty and undone completely by the truth he had already recorded himself. He stood there a little longer than necessary, the phone still in his hand, but now he wasn't scrolling. He was thinking. Then, almost instinctively, he turned back toward the courthouse doors, not all the way inside, just enough to stand near the entrance again. He pulled out his keys, paused, then frowned. There was a slight shift in his expression, the kind that doesn't come from confusion, but from recognition. Something small, something he had overlooked. He reached into his jacket pocket again, this time slower, more deliberate. His fingers moved around inside for a second, then stopped. He pulled something out, a folded envelope. He stared at it, didn't open it immediately, just looked at it like he already knew what was inside. Then he unfolded it, carefully, and there it was. Cash. Not all of it, but enough to understand what had happened. He let out a quiet breath, almost a half laugh, but there was no humor in it, just realization. He had moved it. Not just in the drawer, but here, at some point, without remembering, without tracking it. And then, when it wasn't where he expected, he filled in the rest with assumption. He closed his eyes briefly, because now it wasn't just about being wrong. It was about how far he had gone with it. A claim, an accusation, a courtroom, all built on something he hadn't even verified. Behind him, the courthouse doors opened again. The woman stepped out. She noticed him immediately, not because she was looking, but because he was still standing there in the same place, holding something in his hand like it mattered. She slowed. He turned slightly toward her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he held up the envelope. "I found it," he said. His voice wasn't defensive. It wasn't even apologetic yet. It was clear, the kind of clarity that only comes after everything has already unfolded. The woman looked at the envelope, then at him. No surprise in her face, just a quiet acknowledgement. "Of course you did," she said. He nodded once. "I moved it," he added. "I just didn't remember." She stepped a little closer, but kept her distance. "And instead of checking again," she said, "you brought me to court." He didn't try to explain it. There wasn't a version of that decision that sounded better out loud. "I was sure," he said. She gave a small, almost tired nod. "That's the problem," she replied. "You weren't unsure. You were sure." That distinction stayed in the air, because doubt might have stopped him, but certainty pushed him forward. He looked down at the envelope again. "I'm sorry," he said. This time it landed differently, not rushed, not forced, just direct. The woman studied him for a second, then exhaled slowly. "I had to stand there and defend myself against something I didn't do," she said. "I know." "No," she replied quietly. "You understand it now. That's different." He didn't argue. Because she was right. A few seconds passed, then she shook her head lightly. "Just be careful next time," she said. "Next time?" he repeated, almost to himself. She gave him a look. "There shouldn't be a next time," she said. And with that, she turned and walked away. He didn't stop her, didn't call after her, because there was nothing left to fix in that moment, only something to carry forward. He stood there one last time, then folded the envelope back up and put it away, this time with intention, no distraction, no assumption. Then he walked down the steps and into the street. Inside, the courtroom continued without pause. Another case, another claim, another version of events waiting to be tested. But outside, what remained wasn't the judgment, it was the realization that the strongest evidence in the room hadn't just told a different story. It had exposed the truth he never stopped to check.